stress is neither good nor bad. Stress is distress versus eustress. I always say emotions are just different colors of the stress response. The stress response, our basic function at our core brain, the limbic system, when we perceive an external or internal threat or anything that causes stress from a random thought that comes to our head, that system is hardwired, and that goes. And so to recognize that, to be aware of it, and then to apply appropriate strategies for its management, and then eventually recovering from it, that's how you can maintain calm during and then recover from it, which is imperative for growing the muscle of this resilience. Because just like weight training.
Welcome to the Mindform podcast, where we delve into the minds of some of the most interesting people on the planet, discuss psychology, philosophy, and personal growth, and share the wisdom we uncover with you. Join us as we explore the art of forming our minds. Here's your host, Frank Lawton.
Kia ora from New Zealand. This is the Mindform podcast. Here we share real conversations with earnest seekers of the good life, uncovering gems of wisdom every time. Each guest is a unique expert in philosophy, psychology, and personal growth, and all are members of the Psychotecture Collective and training platform Mindform. This week, I'm privileged to be speaking with Kyle Shepard. Kyle is a father of 4, I just found out, a husband, military resilience instructor, a BJJ brown belt, and a functional fitness coach. In his work, he discusses the trainable mental skills behind resilience. Thanks for being here, Kyle.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So I'll start with, how are you? What's alive in you right now?
I'm doing well. As we were talking about, I just had a baby girl. She's 3 months old as of yesterday. So adjusting, settling in. As we talked about, going 2 to 3, learning how to play zone defense. We're pretty good at it now, but it's still a big adjustment. The wife homeschools, just got promoted in the military, which was a nice surprise. A lot of things happening in my personal life for different pursuits, a lot of kids' activities. So very busy, but all good problems.
Yeah, those sound like all good problems. Yeah, I didn't realize how close in age our 2 newborns are. Mine's 3 months and a week, or 3 months and 2 weeks today, actually.
That's awesome. A little older than mine.
Sweet as. So I just want to start with a bit about you, like your journey. Obviously, you have this Substack you're writing about resilience, and you do your training work with that. How did you get into this? What are some key learnings, some experiences that led you to doing what you do?
Yeah, so I'm active duty Navy. I've been in the Navy for 12 years. My profession is audiology. So I'm a doctor of hearing and balance. And my main mission in the military as an audiologist is to educate, prevent, assess, and manage the most common injury in the military every year, which is noise-induced damage or noise-induced hearing loss, just due to the hazardous noise that everyone's exposed to and how difficult it is to maintain performance while protecting your hearing. So it's a really cool challenge that we take on, but it affects about 10% of the population in the military every year, acquiring some amount of damage. So really cool gig that I'm very passionate about. But my entire life, since I was a kid, I've been also equally, if not more so, passionate about stress. And when I give safety stand downs as an audiologist in the military, I'll talk about audiology sometimes, but as I've been doing the resilience and stress management stuff, I get asked just as often to give presentations on resilience. And so I'll talk about 10% prevalence for noise-induced damage. And then I ask the room, who in here is impacted by stress? Of course, every hand in the room goes up. So while injury is different across the board and hard to diagnose until you get into mental health disorders, obviously we operate on a spectrum and everyone is influenced differently, and stress is inevitable. And it's not necessarily even a bad thing, but as a kid, I was always interested in stress because it was very prevalent in my life and my family, both nuclear and extended. And of course, again, we're all exposed to it. So without thinking about resilience, I was curious as to why some people seem to manage a given stressor relatively well, and then a different person, same stressor, can make them fall apart. Yeah. And always interested in it, went to undergrad at Ohio State intentionally. What the goal was to become a psychiatrist. Started taking chemistry classes and other advanced classes and observing what psychiatry was, and like on the job training type things with some externships. figured out it wasn't for me. So I pivoted to psychology, majored in psychology, but working with kids on it wasn't the spectrum. They didn't say spectrum at the time, but kids with autism, Asperger's syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
different chromosomal disabilities, and communication disorders. I decided to pick up speech and hearing science and then fell into audiology, but had that psychology major, continued to stay interested in it. And when I decided to commission into the Navy 12 years ago at my first duty station, I learned of an opportunity to get trained in a component of what's called combat operational stress control. The program stood up by the Navy Marine Corps back in 2007, just in response to high rates of burnout across the Department of Defense at the time, military, contractor, civilian, and of course dependents, just due to the long-term conflict and everything that was happening abroad. So every component of the military stood up a different stress management program, and COSC, Combat Operational Stress Control, is what the Navy had. So I was formally trained now 11 years ago in that program, and throughout my career, I've taken on higher and higher leadership positions. Took over the program at Naval Hospital Guam, and we grew that to one of the largest programs in the Navy, got recognized for some best practices, and got recognized as the #1 program in the Navy at the time. And now I'm in Southern Maryland. And while they don't have a formal program, I've kind of taken on writing about it, talking about it, doing lecture series on it, both in on base and out in town for other private organizations, conferences that I go to. And it just, because of the influence that it's had in my life, I'm really passionate about sharing any lessons learned, both in the formal training I had, but also just in the application to me personally. Now a year and a half ago, I started wanting to put my articles that I was writing for different publications somewhere. And a friend was like, "You're already on Substack as a consumer. Why don't you become a creator?" And I had a bunch of journal entries from COVID time. And so I just made a commitment to write one post a week, and then started about 6 months ago now. Oh man, maybe more than that now. I started getting a little bit more into engagement, and it turned into something I didn't expect. And yeah, I, I talk more resilience these days than I do audiology, my main profession in the military, which is hilarious. But yeah, it was not intentional. It was just always an interest of mine, and I read on it all the time. I practice it all the time, and yeah, just continuous learner. And it's an amazing realm that applies to all domains of life. The skill that is resilience.
Mm. Interesting how it was somewhat of an interest in all of that that led you into psychology, but then you steered away from it, right? Following that path where it led you into audiology, and then you came back. Was it that just that one training COSC that really just lit that spark for you, and you discovered it, and that's kind of set this ball rolling to where you are now?
Not really. So in the military, you're a leader first. They tell us as officers, and then I'm an
Hmm.
audiologist second. I went into audiology because it's also a helping profession. I knew I wanted to help people, and I knew in audiology, where I'm dealing with different hearing loss disorders or balance disorders, that my ability to connect with patients and help them help themselves. That was a skill that I drew from psychology and a lot of my undergrad training, and just loved how it could apply to audiology more specifically rather than psychology as a whole.
Right.
It made sense to me at the time. But when I got trained, I was just a member of the team. When I went to Guam, I volunteered to be a member of that team, but their whole leadership team, go figure, was psychologists, social workers, mental health professionals. And so they were really excited to see somebody who was not in the mental health profession be passionate about teaching stress management, and what I was really
Hmm.
passionate about, resilience, which we'll also talk about quite a bit today, because there's a stigma around a psychologist talking to you about stress management, because now it gets looked at as like it gets wrapped into an illness where it is
Yeah.
not. Just like I mentioned spectrum disorders with autism, which they call that now, you fall on a spectrum. Everything falls on a spectrum. And that is absolutely true of how we respond and function with stress. You're not either good to go or you need professional intervention. There are
Hmm.
shades of gray all in between. And where we can optimize function or maximize function in the in between, early intervention, effective a level of care. That's true for all types of medicine, but definitely personal medicine. If you can help yourself first, great. And if it's not working, then you can seek support systems. And if that's not working, you can seek professional help. We have tiers of support, and the earlier you intervene, the better. So I got more involved, and then the psychologist who ran the team was like, "Man, it would be really cool to have a non-psychologist take over this program." And I did that for 2.5 years, and that's when it turned into something that I wasn't planning. And when I got to Maryland, I kept it going with the writing and then presenting, and now it's bigger than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, it's amazing how the same skills, the same education, the same concepts, just how they're framed can really have an impact on how they're received and how many people are willing to engage or take it up. Like, is this framed as, oh, this is for people who are unwell? Yeah, this is for people who need to get back up to baseline. Or is it framed as, oh, do you want to be really resilient? Do you want to be able to handle anything? And just the framing, even if it's the same toolkit, ultimately, can make a big difference. So I see the value in bringing in a different voice into that space in Guam. Uh,
Well put. Yeah.
yeah, so on this journey, you've moved all over the world, clearly, and you've had a lot of different experiences. So we can call that the landscape, and you've carried an evolving map with you, right? The beliefs and values that you use to navigate all this, and you've learned a lot about resilience and other things there. So map, landscape, right? What's the X on your map? Where have you been trying to get to this whole time? What's the North Star? An answer to a question, a state of things that you've been aiming for?
Man, I appear to those I work with, my family and my children for the most part, as a really calm individual. So I guess
Hmm.
I appear like I'm a really resilient individual, but the inner work and the inner calm. I'm a type A. I'm always leaning into action in any domain of my life. My mind is constantly thinking of what's next, what can I focus on, and there's value to that. But like balancing that hunger with contentment, being present in the moment, and then taking on adversity as it inevitably comes, particularly the uncontrolled, unplanned forms of adversity, as simple as just like a kid having a hard day and throwing plans off. And my boys right now, they're going through a phase of listening is not their thing. And go figure, almost 6 and 4 year old, they're doing their own thing a lot of times. And while my wife and I are constantly talking about how to apply different concepts to parenting, just that inner calm, and regardless of how I appear on the outside, getting more centered on the inside, to effectively perform in the way that I want to as a father, a husband, and man.
Awesome. Yeah, good goal. And you do realize the importance of that when you become a parent, because anything that's I guess unbalanced right in here, it comes out, it spills, it has an impact because kids are so sensitive, they pick up on all of that stuff. That's definitely become a more central priority in my whole sort of um all my goals around who do I want to be and how am I going to make that happen is staying regulated. And also, of course, kids are going to trigger you in all sorts of ways with their screaming and the rest of it.
We and we stress over the things we care about most, and there's nothing I care about more in
Of
this world
course.
than my family. So, of course, my stress will often be in relation to my family because I care the most about them. But stress is neither good nor bad. I mean, stress is distress versus eustress. Now we can start talking about productive versus unproductive. But how we frame the stressor and our response to it and how we're feeling on the inside, that framing, those feelings that we apply to the inevitable stress response that happens. And I always say emotions are just different colors of the stress response. Of course, the
Mm,
neurotransmitters are different, and things change, but the stress response, our basic function at our core brain and the limbic system, when we perceive an external or internal threat or anything that causes stress from a random thought that comes to our head, that system is hardwired, and that goes. And so to recognize that, to be aware of it, and then to apply appropriate strategies for its management, and then eventually recovering from it, that's how you can maintain calm during and then recover from it, which is
hmm.
imperative for growing the muscle of this resilience. Because just like weight training, you're not going to get stronger unless you lift some weights. So you go into the domain, you cause that stress response physically, and then the recovery is just as important as the training, or else you're going to overtrain. Your muscles will break down. You
Yeah.
need that time to recover. It doesn't take that long when you're doing it intelligently and lifting intelligently, but the recovery, I'm big on recovery right now too, as far as any stressor. The concepts of resilience apply across domains, but I like to differentiate resilience and burnout simply from recovery. So I could hold this water bottle our whole conversation, no big deal. This stressor is not a problem for me right now. I could hold this, but if I never put this down, I were to hold this up, this very light water bottle, eventually wear and tear on my shoulder to the point of causing physical injury. And if I don't address that, it could even lead to death eventually, this mild, small stressor, because I'm not allowing myself to recover
Mm.
from it. So entering the domain, exiting it to recover, and then entering again to expand.
So that you just presented such an extreme example of the dose makes the poison, the deadly. Anything's deadly, even holding a water bottle. But true though. But true though. One thing that kind of stood out to me is as you're talking there is uh, maybe a somewhat unique, although I'm buying into it, way of understanding stress and how to respond to it, which is, stress happens and it's fine and it's normal, and let it happen. It's how you interpret stress, it's how you recover from stress, it's how you respond to stress. I think in the conversation around stress, we talk about avoiding it, mainly, right? And we sort of talk about there's two ways people talk about that. There's avoiding it in terms of avoiding things that stress you out, which of course has its own risks and problems, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But there's also, oh, okay, there's the kind of things that normally stress me out, but can I just get to a place? Can I be the kind of person who just doesn't get phased at all by that, and these systems don't activate? So I'm curious to hear more about that. You say yeah, about stress being necessary. How do we take, if the stress response is there, if it's normal, if we're not meant to fight it, it's instinctive, right? How do we turn it from stress that's not helpful into stress that's helpful? What makes the difference there?
Great question. So we know stressors, so events, whether they're external or internal, are inevitable. For sure, every day is going to cause some amount of stress in the different domains of your life that you care about. So we know it's inevitable. It's unavoidable. It's going to happen. We also know that in order to grow, in order to change, you need to have some amount of stress. If you remain comfortable, if you avoid all forms of stressors, the great quote, the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody is the worst thing that's ever happened to them. So, like, if you don't have exposure to stressors, the significance of maybe what somebody else perceives as mild stressor will be absolutely significant for you
Mm-hmm.
because, again, our core brain, we are threat detectors. We evolved that way. Our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system is embedded within our limbic system. That's what we evolved from. It's there no matter if it's a true life threat, financial troubles, or your kid just having a hard time. The stress response is going to happen. So now we need to learn first how to manage it. So if it's inevitable, the framing around how we perceive it, and like you said, I'm not for just jumping into every form of stress and stressor if it's not productive for you in alignment with your values. So avoidance is actually a great controllable for stressors in your life that are not offering value to you. So if and when something on your plate is not offering value to your life, definitely discard that. We need to be able to focus on the things that matter to us and align with our core values. So that's very important. But after that, if it's unavoidable and that's not a controllable and a stressor, you now have simply two options: acceptance or misery. And I try not to choose misery as often as possible. So if we cannot avoid a stressor, accepting the things that are outside of our control and then focusing on the things that are within our control. And while I know I'm as guilty as any parent, I try to control my son sometimes when they're not listening. That never goes well, and I lose control of my own emotional regulation, and it only makes the situation worse. So what we truly have control over in this life, I like to say, are two things, and it's not our thoughts. So some thoughts come to my head, and I'm not very proud of them. I don't know where they came from. I, Insanity, but I recognize those thoughts and I don't act on them. And other thoughts come to my head that I'm really proud of, but I deserve no credit. Who knows where the muse came from and offered me a great insight for whatever reason. But our thought interpretation, so the lens that we view our thoughts through, is our first opportunity for control in life. And then after thought interpretation, subsequent action. And that could just be what you do internally with your perspective, your mindset. And of course, it could be your words, your actions, your behaviors. And the great quote, our thoughts lead to our behaviors lead to habit patterns. Those habit patterns become part of your character, and your character ultimately becomes your destiny. So the thought interpretation can really influence your destiny is a pretty empowering thought in and of itself, because thinking patterns, a lot of us, we operate pretty subconsciously. I know I'm guilty of it too, just passively living, just taking on things as they come in. But when you're awake, stay conscious. That's what I like to say. If you're conscious, particularly first and foremost, of your thoughts and then interpreting them productively for yourself, it's amazing. You're in the same environment, but you change your decision on how you want to view that environment. Your functioning will change. The environment then may eventually change around you because you are a calming present. You are empowering yourself to be productive despite the circumstance that you don't have control over. So thought interpretation, which basically is the most important skill and awareness that I like to talk about, it relates directly to self-awareness. So your thought interpretations, I'm not good at solving problems I'm not aware of. So that really influences my self-awareness. But now we can start talking about how do you manage the different forms of stress, and allow time to pass to where we can ultimately leave the domain that's causing stress, or it settles down, and then make sure we recover from it. And now we can cause plasticity in our system, both around our thinking patterns and around the stress response that we have recovered from, to enhance the muscle that is resilience. Because I define resilience as the ability to effectively manage and then eventually recover from stress. And I
Hmm.
love that sentence because, again, I can talk about it all day. Stress is neither good nor bad. And what we mentioned already, how do we manage stress? You can't train the skill that is resilience without first managing what's on your plate effectively and getting to a point of relative recovery, to where then, yes, we can now start intentionally causing different forms of stress with prepared strategies to train that skill of resilience.
Mm. I like, it's a bit different, and it's an improvement. Thought interpretation as opposed to just what you think, right? I mean, one way people interpret a lot of this dialogue around that core philosophical truth that shows up everywhere. It's not the thing in and of itself; it's your reaction to it. That determines your experience. Like, just I think a lot of people see that and they interpret it as, oh, okay, I need to control my thoughts. My thoughts really matter, and then you just end up in this battle with, you're right, these thoughts that just come, you didn't choose them. Your unconscious is as mysterious a world to you as the world, right? What you're aware of is a very small part. So yeah, that's a valuable shift, and somewhat freeing, because you don't need to be concerned with what thought just came up. You just need to be concerned with what you do with that, how you respond to that. I had a friend when I was younger who kind of mourned to me, I suppose, about how he was such a terrible person because of all these thoughts that came up in his head, and I was so confused. I was like, but you think that's terrible, so you're not a bad person because you think those terrible things are terrible and you wouldn't do them. But he couldn't get past that at the time. So yeah, I love that distinction. Yeah, I want to get into um, the specific shifts, like functionally. So we're in a moment in our lives, stress, where it's activated, right? What do we do? And I'm sure there's a lot of different answers depending on the context, but maybe you can just give some examples. But what do you do mentally, physically, immediately or later, whatever it is, to ensure that doesn't become a chronic stress situation, that you're not ruminating on that it's stress that doesn't damage you, or kind of, yeah, cause you to behave in ways you don't want to behave, but it becomes a stress you can build from. It's a stress you manage and recover from. What do
Great.
you do, like, specifically? Sorry.
No problem. Have you ever heard of the 90-second rule? A woman by the name of Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, a neuroscientist who studies stress. She did some, I forget the exact research, but she demonstrated that the stress response, when not influenced by rumination or anything else in our thinking, or basically think like the emotion of surprise. So if somebody came up behind me right now and spooked me as I'm talking to you, if I didn't sit there and think, why in the hell would they do that when I'm on the Mindform podcast, and ruminate on that, if it was just like my wife got me because we're goofy or something, if that happened, for sure, if she actually scared me, my stress response would be activated. I realize it's not a real threat. I don't ruminate on it. It's been demonstrated that the average stress response takes about 90 seconds to get
Right.
back to relative homeostasis or baseline in the activity within your brain. So knowing that, and that rumination and the chronic stress that a lot of people take on influences that, it's what can we do to try and get out of sympathetic function. We know it's going to be there for about 90 seconds on average, which is just how accurate that is. Who cares? It's brief. What can we do to encourage parasympathetic nervous system function, or slowing down of our system? And my first answer always is conscious breathing. So as I mentioned, when you're awake, stay conscious. I am really attuned with my breathing, because we know when the stress response initiates, a lot of things happen physiologically and automatically in our bodies. Our vision changes, it hones in, our heart rate increases, our breathing changes sometimes. And it's good to like think about these symptoms, because we all experience them subjectively, and sometimes we objectively show like blotching on our skin and the stress response. It varies person to person. Like I can feel it in my gut, I can feel it in my chest, and I definitely notice it in my breathing. So taking an autonomic nervous system function in our breathing and making it conscious, and there are so many different types of breath work that you can do. Andrew Huberman's big on talking about the physiologic sigh, a deep nasal inhale to capacity or perceived capacity, and then attempt to take another inhale and then slow exhale. For me, I like to first draw into nasal breathing. It's hard to hyperventilate nasally, if not impossible. So you're going to focus your breathing nasally, and then I really like to focus on exhales. So hyperoxygenation, hyperventilation is in the inhales that can increase activity, increase energy, increase sympathetic nervous system. That's great if you want to wake up. But if you want to slow down and decrease stress response, prolonged exhales. So very simply for me, I can teach breath work all day. I love that stuff. But nasal breathing, prolonged exhales. And you do that for a minute, minute and a half, and no one even knows you're doing it. So if you're getting ripped out by your supervisor and you're stressed out or having a difficult conversation, you can do this live time. No one's aware that you're practicing a strategy that is conscious breathing, because
That's like a magic trick.
first and foremost, you know you're stressed. Because again, you're not going to do this unless you have that awareness. So stress response has initiated. Where's the controllable? Breathing first and foremost, always. So that's the physical strategy that I talk about. There are so many others, and we could spend the whole hour talking about them. But the mental strategy I then like to talk about is
Before we go into that, could you like do a demo of the breathing? It's nice to see it.
Yeah. So I mean, so the physiologic sigh, I'll show that because there's good evidence that it's the most efficient way to slow down the sympathetic nervous system compared to some other forms of deep breathing. So physiologic sigh, again, I'm going to describe it before I do it because I'm going to do it all nasally and it'll be hard to tell. I'm going to take a full inhale to perceive capacity and then attempt to take another inhale just to get a little bit more air in, and then prolonged exhale. So that second inhale is a little bit more exaggerated to get in there, to get that extra air in. But for me, simply, I'm just like, I'm making my exhale probably twice as long if I can. Now, if I'm really hyperactivated, that's going to be harder. Think like after a sprint. The best way to slow down your body and recover is prolonged exhales. That's very hard to do when you are exhausted and worn out. But the more you focus on exhaling and nasal breathing, like if you're doing a high intensity interval training workout and you have brief amounts of time to recover, you just want to pant through your mouth as much as possible. But if you can just really center yourself, and it actually feels hard, but it's helping your body slow down to recover, focusing on prolonging that exhale as much as possible. That's going to help you physically reduce that stress response.
Yeah, it is hard. I know. I just started this new kind of workout where it's like 100% capacity, like full tilt, maximum for about 30 seconds, and I only do it twice, and that's my workout for the day. And within sort of 10 seconds of basically collapsing at the end of that and trying to do the same thing, because my body's just like I'm absolutely gone. And but that breath makes a huge difference. But at the start it feels like I'm killing myself, like I'm depriving myself of oxygen. But after even just 15 seconds, 20 seconds of that, it's a huge lowering in my body's activation. So can relate to how difficult and effective.
The more you do anything, the better you get too. So like you bring conscious awareness to it initially, it feels hard initially, but then the more you do it, our body's prone to plasticity throughout the lifespan in every way. So I love the exercise physiology principle, the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. So when you intentionally impose demands on your system, there will be specific adaptations that happen in accordance with it. Unfortunately, a lot of us who live passively, those adaptations are still happening to the demands that are coming in. We're just not aware of them. So your body's changing in whatever you're doing, intentionally or not. But initially, you do things consciously, and then you become competent there. You keep doing that, and pretty soon you start muscle memory, subconscious competence, and you do it without thinking much about it. So you can create these productive habits, even as simple as your breathing and recovery and some of these high intensity workouts, which is a great domain to train that skill. Just so I don't forget the mental strategy. When we're stressed, we tend to jump to conclusions. We tend to have conclusive statements about what we perceive. I love the skill of uncertainty in most domains. So certainty and conclusions typically are going to just influence the stress that you have. But if you can create questions, so charitable interpretations are reframes of whatever you're perceiving, even if you're wrong. The skill of most charitable interpretation, whether that's for the event that's happening or the person that's causing the stress, you could just come up with another idea of why someone's behaving a certain way or why something outside of your control happened. Just considering an alternative, practicing the skill that is cognitive flexibility, and questioning. Questioning activates your prefrontal cortex, your executive function of the brain, which will help activate other areas of the brain rather than just the emotional reptilian brain in the center, which suppresses everything else. So the more you can activate other areas of the brain through questioning, the more that you can help again with parasympathetic nervous system activation.
Mm. Again, that's um, similar to what you said earlier around thought interpretation, right? It's kind of the bare minimum that gets you into that threshold of having some control over the situation. It's not coming up with a new interpretation, locking and this stuff can feel overwhelming and just not your brain's not capable of it in the moment, but just introducing uncertainty, just entertaining another idea. And I think most of us can relate to the experience of whether it's happened by chance or whether we're doing it intentionally. Something stressful is happening, and somehow the idea enters our mind that, oh, maybe it's not what we think it is. And even if we don't know that or don't believe that, the whole situation does. It feels massively different just introducing that. Something that seems really, really important to being able to utilize both of these strategies that you present, the physical and the mental strategy, is the ability to recognize when we've entered or when we're entering place of stress, right? When all of this is activated, I think in those moments, for a lot of us, that's going to be the last time that we're thinking to do this stuff in the first place. Is that something you've worked on with in the military when you're having these conversations with people? Is how do we come to recognize when we're in a state of stress, and how do we slowly develop the habit of bringing these ideas, bringing these strategies to mind when we're in that moment, as opposed to what normally happens.
You very wisely said when we've entered or know we're entering an environment that causes stress, because absolutely, if we're just reactive, it's going to be very hard to then bring up strategies that are not subconscious or developed for ourselves. So again, a lot of stress is inevitable and it comes without you being aware of it. And that's just daily life. I talk about this stuff every day and I fail at it every day too, particularly at home with my kids. At least internally, the fire gets way too big that I'm proud of, even if on the outside, I manage it pretty well. It's a never ending process that I'm working on day in and day out. But when I'm going to work or like even getting behind the wheel in my car and I'm running late, like you know that traffic's going to happen, things are outside of your control when you're in the car. If there's environments in your life, whether that's certain colleagues, certain conversations behind the wheel in your car, expecting there to be some stressors that take place. And if you're prone to stress in those domains, you know you're entering that environment. So you can think about ahead of time, where am I most prone to stress and how can I
Mm-hmm.
enter those environments with a proactive and productive mindset to maybe bring up some of these strategies in real time when they happen for the ones outside of your control. But we're getting closer now to talking about my favorite concept when it comes to resilience, which is intentionally inducing the stress response with prepared strategies ahead of time, because we can cause the stress response does not differentiate behind who caused it or what caused it. It's just activated. So
Mm-hmm.
no matter if the stressor is physically induced, mentally induced, the stress response is still the same and it's prone to plasticity in the same way. So intentionally inducing stress, whether that is with physical training, like we talked about, it could be all kinds of different mental ways, having difficult conversations on purpose with people you disagree with prepared strategies, maybe fasting from your unique urges intentionally for a while, just so you can feel that urge come up and manage it accordingly. Talking in public, doing that if you're prone to stress with that, going into these domains intentionally. Socially could be if you are more introverted, intentionally going to an excursion with others into that domain. If you are really extroverted, intentionally being in solitude for a little while and listening to your own thoughts and being alone with yourself. And the options are endless to intentionally cause the stress response with prepared strategies at a manageable level while making sure you're physically safe, of course, but at a manageable level. You don't need to go from the couch to 30 seconds of 100% max effort like you're doing right now. You want to build up to that capacity, but making yourself stressed on purpose for a brief amount of time and then recovering from it. You're training the muscle and the skill that is resilience, just like anything else. And the plasticity in that system is prone to adaptation, just like any other aspect of ourselves. I'm pretty convinced that there's nothing about ourselves outside of physical attributes that are not able to be modified, that can't be viewed as skills.
Mm, brilliant. Why? I guess. I mean, the answer's obvious to me somewhat, but can you give us the why of like, why do you love that, presenting that to people, doing it yourself? What's the point of presenting yourself with stressful situations with management strategies prepared ahead of time?
It's selfish. It's the impact it's had on my life. So by doing it myself, I've treated myself like an experiment for this. And by the way, this is not a new concept. I mean,
Of course.
Masonius Rufus back in the day was talking about voluntary discomfort. And this is basically just, while I didn't know it at the time when I was saying intentional stress, because when I was talking about resilience training, intentional stress in Guam, that's when I was starting to read Stoicism. Actually, it was Donald Robertson, who I know had a great podcast with Ryan a while ago. And I listened to that after Ryan and I talked. It was phenomenal. But Donald Robertson's book, How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, was one of the first reads that I had to introduce me to Stoicism. And then I found Masonius Rufus later. Seneca and of course, Epictetus, they all talk about different forms of resilience without using the word. And this is centuries ago. And it's so interesting how the ancient wisdom applies to modern problems in so many ways. And voluntary discomfort, which Masonius wrote on quite a bit, is very much the same as intentional stress. I'm just intentional in that term because I think stress is such a prime word for reframing these days. I
Mm,
know growing up,
love it.
I thought stress is terrible. Chronic stress actually is terrible for you, but I thought stress just needs to be avoided because of how I saw it impacting the people I cared about in my life. So how can we help people to stop being stressed? But as I coincidentally ended up going and getting the psychology degree and everything else that we talked about already, and then realizing like, no, you can't avoid it. How can you reframe it? And then reading books, talking to people, and then living it myself, uh, inducing it on purpose with prepared strategies in different ways can then take you from maybe where you're like, I always forget this guy's name, but back in the 1970s, a guy came up with the skill development, 4 stages of skill development. So with skills, we're initially subconsciously incompetent. You don't even know you suck. So like you haven't even thought about it. It's just something in your life that you're unaware of that is an opportunity for growth because you don't even think about it. But then maybe we talk about the skill of resilience and you realize, you know what, that's an area of my life that I can improve, at least in some domain. So now you're consciously incompetent. You know that this area of your life is an opportunity. So now, how can we manage what's on our plate to get to a point of relative function so we can start training that muscle and then practicing and developing strategies to be consciously competent in that domain, again, consciously when we're actively thinking about it. But just like any other skill, the more you do it, you can move from conscious competence to subconscious competence, where you're
Mm,
doing a productive strategy without even thinking about it. And stress is so dynamic. Life inevitably comes in phases. So parenting is a great example of that. This is an area of my life that will change every day and will always be an opportunity for improvement. I am not subconsciously competent for managing my stress as a parent, but I've gotten better over time for sure, in relation to a lot of things that my wife and I work on continuously.
amazing. I that fourth stage, right, which you can kind of see as moving through a quadrant of, you know, do you know or not know on one side, and are you capable or not capable, right, on the other side. And there's a similar quadrant I just encountered recently, and I'm trying to map the two together. This is just me for a bit of fun, which is kind of the it's a quadrant of learning, but in relationship, or it's like of apprenticeship or discipleship, right? Which is okay. First, so I'm the learner in this case. You do, I watch. Then you do, I help. Then I do, you help, and then I do, you watch. And it's yeah. Anyway, it's just I'm trying to map those
Right.
two on top of each other.
It's like see,
Um,
do, teach, but then yeah, and then you're just doing without needing taught.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I like it.
Okay, I'm curious like what gets in the way. So you're teaching people all of this stuff, all of these strategies. The truth is there. And by the way, actually, I wanted to remark with this intentional stress stuff. It's crazy how rare it is that you hear people encouraging this, given that it's really psychology 101, like the foundational, one of the earliest and still the most effective treatment for anxiety, for example, is intentional exposure, right, to the thing you're anxious about at a manageable dose. And yet in our world where we're all talking about psychology, wellness, mental health, trauma, that is not often a part of the conversation. Very interesting. So that's a bit
Exposure
shocking.
therapy,
Yeah,
100% exposure therapy, and it just so much evidence about how effective it is.
yeah.
But my big thing when it comes to resilience, like exposure therapy is phenomenal. And what I love about thinking like intentional stress in relation to exposure therapy is, let's say we're physically training. So like when I do a really hard workout, the I think of the physical benefits of the workout as a byproduct of the
Hmm.
physical vehicle of training resilience. So, like, I'm getting my stress response up. I'm trying to manage with my breathing during the rest intervals, or maintaining my output at 70% with controlled breathing for what impacts there. So, mostly nasal, but maybe mouth. I do perceived exertion scales because I'm a functional fitness coach. And so, on the perceived exertion scales, I talk about how to regulate your breathing in those zones so you can maintain output and not get into your 90 100% because no one can maintain 90 100% for that long if the workout is that. But we can maintain our own subjective 60% for quite some time if you're good at gauging. And again, coming back to breathing, the nose is a governor for output. You cannot go 100% if you are breathing through your nose. So I
Mm.
do a lot of workouts where we throw water in our mouth, and you got to keep that water in your mouth and not swallow it or spit it out, because now you have to breathe through your nose. It is not
Yeah,
comfortable, but it's a governor for sure. So I love thinking that if I'm training resilience in any domain, how can I take the lessons learned a- and then translate them outside of that domain to other areas of my life? So you see exceptional people be incredible in specific domains, but maybe really struggle in other areas of their life. They have all the capabilities of resilience, but it's just not translating
yeah.
to that other. How can we use intentional training of stress to optimize function in the opportunities that are our life?
Yeah, and it is the same toolkit, and I think a lot of people have encountered the power of something like starting an exercise ritual, just the cascading effects of like, oh, just that capacity to stay cool for a little bit when you're uncomfortable. That does generalize, but yeah, not always. Um, yeah, it's kind of incredible how ubiquitous that human capacity is, and you said it yourself, anywhere but the physical, although it depends what part of the physical you're talking about, because of course anything from being able to switch your metabolizing system, right, from sort of sugars to fats and ketones, whether it being able to manage heat, being able to manage the cold, emotional stress, hunger, a physical exertion, muscular exertion, bone exertion, tendon exertion, like all of these things, pretty much every system we have in the body, incredibly built into it, and the mind's no different. Built into it has if I encounter being beyond capacity or right on the fringe of capacity, there's a system in place there to change and adapt so I can handle that capacity moving forward. And I'm always baffled at you think of any capacity of the body that applies pretty much. That blows
And
my mind.
you think of our ancestors and what they endured, whether it's the environment, like you said, all those great stressors that you just listed, or modern day exceptional people. Like the art of the possible. You see it as possible, and that's the human condition. Like, yes, there are certain um, attributes that people possess when they're born that make them a little bit more adept at a certain skill. So they start off with a better hand. But again, we can change almost every aspect of ourselves to become quite capable in a different way if we really want to. So that's why I love psychotecture and everything behind Design the Mind and Mindform, because you can build your mind like an architect to the way you want to. It takes time. It's not easy. The concepts are pretty simple, but it's going to require work on your end. But if you want to, you can change your life with very simple strategies.
Yeah, I love so that for you, kind of the intentional stress, that for you is the means, right, to that end. It's okay, I can't manage this, whatever it is. There's something I want to be able to do, there's some trait I want to have, there's some skill I want to have, whatever it is. So what do? I enter a situation that's right on the edge of my capability, or maybe even a little bit beyond it, whatever, and I bring in recovery and management strategies for stress primarily, right, into that case, into that situation. That for you is the how. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when I give like lecture series, I tend to start with stress management because I don't want to go around and people can be put off by it too. Like if I just come in and say, stress yourself out, that's how you can become less stressed. Now we need to figure out how to manage what's on our plate first so we can actually recover. And recovery,
Hmm.
it's funny how like we get in the way of the best forms of recovery, which is sleep, nutrition, and movement, with rumination and anxiety and all of these other things that get in the way psychologically. So you see people taking supplements and medications, and don't get me wrong, there's places for medication for sure. We have these amazing professional institutions for when, because asking for help, that is a strength. If you have like decreased your function to a point where you know you're not rebounding, not recovering, that is a sign of strength for seeking support. Either it's within your relative networks, or of course professionally with all the resources out these days, so you can get over whatever relative hump and get back to a point of function. Manage what's on your plate to get to a point of the ability to train the skill. So we got to manage
Mm,
what's on our plate first. Focus on getting to a point of recovery that we can start practicing the skill. And you said it many times as well, like exploring your own capacity, expanding those edges takes time. So my 60% may be very different than somebody else's 60%. So wherever you're starting, just a little bit uncomfortable. But once you become a little bit more comfortable with what initially made you uncomfortable, another exercise physiology principle that I love, progressive overload. You
yeah,
don't just do the same thing every day forever, because now you're going to plateau, and it's not. And if anything, it's going to actually be detrimental to you. You need variability, but you also need to increase the stressor in some way. And you can change stressor domains in so many different ways based on how you're training it. But you expand your capacity by adding more after you've gotten comfortable with what initially made you uncomfortable. And then in a month's time, it's amazing how quickly plasticity can change when you specifically train something. So one thing I do on Substack every month, I do a daily physical challenge. It's always less than 10 minutes, often less than 5 minutes, because you asked me earlier, what's one of the biggest like deterrents of this stuff? Time is absolutely one of them. So you tell people they need to work out, and then you give them like a 2-hour fitness program to go into the gym. That's going to be a big barrier to entry for a lot of people.
hmm,
It does
hmm.
not take long to cause adaptations in your system if you are training with intention and effort consistently over time. And again, self
Consistency.
experimentation. It is amazing some of the things that I've been able to do physically by this methodology of whatever I'm trying to do. For example, the Murph workout. Are you familiar with Michael Murphy and the CrossFit workout called the Murph?
No.
So he's a Navy SEAL who passed away. So the book, his book Seal of Honor is fantastic, but man, why is that movie not coming to me right now? Come to me in a second. Either way, really popular movie, Soul Survivor. Um, I believe Lone Survivor story of what happened. If you've seen that, Michael Murphy was the head of that SEAL team. Um, 3 of those SEALs died. One lived, the lone survivor, Marcus Luttrell, and something called Operation Red Wings during the conflict in Iraq. Anyway, that CrossFit made a workout called the Murph, where you wear a 20-pound weight vest, you run a mile, and then you do 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and then run a mile. Most people break up the pull-ups, push-ups, and squats into 5, 10, 15, and then you do 20 sets of that. Very challenging workout, but very functional whole body workout. And I've done it every year for many years. My best time was back when at my first duty station, and that's also 9 years ago. And recently, when the Murph Challenge happened, because it's done on Memorial Day every year, honoring individuals who've lost their lives, protecting our country, first responders, everything else. So every day, the daily challenge was 5, 10, 15, wear weight vests or not, do as much as possible in 5 minutes. I was doing it in 10 minutes, but I did it every day, and I beat my best time from when I was 30 years old. I'm 39 now, by over 5 minutes, and I was in a
Woo!
time that could do well in some like regional CrossFit circuits, which is incredible. Like I'm in good shape, but 1 month of dedicated effort there, and I've done this with many other um, physical training, breath work, like breath hold. You do that every day for a month, you'll be amazed. Offer some variability in the stimulus, but it's amazing how much you can adapt, again, with intention, effort, and consistency.
Another
Doesn't take much
example of
time.
a physical system is oxygen storage capacity that can be adapted. Yeah, it's insane. I'm kind of putting all of some of the stuff that you've put together. I'm talking to someone else in about 15 hours for the podcast, and I've written a book called, his name's Robert. I can't remember the last name at the moment, but he's written a book called Elevate, and it's all about capacity, and it talks about increasing your capacity, increasing your spiritual capacity, which means kind of like knowledge of your values, intellectual capacity, which is management systems, and then physical capacity and emotional capacity. And it's this idea that, if you want to kind of elevate your performance, meeting your potential, it's about increasing your capacities. And I think the adaptability, the flexibility, the changeability of people is one of those things that's just ubiquitously missed, like as a primary barrier to people achieving what they want to achieve, experiencing the growth, the change they want to achieve. It's missing that we're not static. It's looking at things through a static lens. So this example of progressive overload. People either start at the bottom and stay there, or they start beyond their capacity and try to stay there. They think it has to be one or the other, but you can start small and tick, tick, tick up. And that's another thing. It's an overtime kind of thing, right? Where people, what adaptability allows is, okay, instead of I have to be there or I'm not there, I can over a month or I can over 2 months. And when you start to make a bit of room for that, suddenly a lot of things are possible. But it's also, I think we imagine this has been the case for me many times on and off throughout my growth journey. Is there's something I want to be capable of, there's something I want to be doing with my life, a new habit or whatever, and I imagine it, and what it's beyond my current capacity, right? And something that puts me off continuing the pursuit towards that is, oh, that's just going to be exhausting if I'm doing that all the time. That's not something I can maintain. So I'm just going to burn myself out if I try to do that. It's hard to imagine it being possible that you can sustain something, that you can be capable of doing something consistently when you're not capable of it now. But yeah, just that stretch of the imagination that actually my ability, my capacity can change.
Yeah, change doesn't happen in the comfort zone. So, but
Yeah.
it can absolutely change. And it doesn't require, like you said, being miserable and overworking yourself and completely. Like, I love high intensity training. You don't need to do high intensity training to have adaptations happen in the physical domain. There's many different ways that you can approach it. But the concept is the same. A little bit of discomfort in the given domain that you want to improve, and do that consistently over time. And before you know it, you're doing things that you couldn't imagine doing if you would have remained comfortable. So that concept comes back time and time again in so many areas of life.
Yeah, mate. Awesome. Okay, well, let's kind of wrap it up a little bit. First, I want to know what's new for you right now. So, what are you learning? What's an upcoming project? Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, what's kind of the next step in what you're learning about resilience, about growth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always learning in so many different. I love Substack because I consume more than I create these days. There's so many amazing writers out there writing on similar concepts. I have some big physical challenges coming up, so I'm testing myself in ways that I haven't done in a while. So we talked about like how you can progressively improve over time. Another thing that's important to note is setbacks are inevitable. Setbacks are opportunities, but your life is going to hit you in unprepared ways all the time. And so I broke my shoulder 2 years ago, had
Oof.
surgery, and that kind of set me back with some things. But the new skills that I picked up in that time, and kind of the shifts that happened, I started writing during that time. So my life has changed, and maybe it wouldn't have in the same way if I hadn't broken my shoulder. But that often kicks people off course. But what's really interesting is once you get back on the relative horse, your adaptations will happen more efficiently if you had been in the
Mm,
domain already. So, like the neuroplasticity that still is there. Yes, it's gonna be hard for the first few days, but like my wife's getting ready to start working out again after having her baby, and I told her like, hey, this first week's gonna be kind of tough. Make sure you recover, take your time, but remember how long it took you to get to the point of capacity that you're at when you stop working out. You'll get there much quicker with consistency
mm,
this time because it's in your body now in the ways that it wasn't before. Um, so yeah, I have a challenge coming up with a buddy who's pretty big on Twitter. Zach Hommel is his name. He's trying to do 1,200 push-ups in an hour. So he had a really cool post about how boxers would do that daily. So that's gonna be 20 push-ups a minute on average. He has his own system. I'm gonna
Mm.
try to do more than 1,000 burpees in an hour. So I've done some. I have a previous world record in doing uh, they're called chest to ground burpees in 3 minutes. So 3 minutes is much different than 1 hour, but I was able to get a world record during COVID for burpees. So I became pretty adept at that skill by training that when I couldn't go to the gym and do jujitsu. Anyway, I haven't done burpees for a long period of time, and sometime I think 1,000 is doable, but I'm intentionally training to see if I can get my capacity there in a few different unique ways. So that would be a cool challenge to take on personally. I'm going to do an obstacle course race. My son, my about to be 6-year-old, is really into climbing and different things, and I want to start doing stuff that he likes, and I think he'll really enjoy this. But he's kind of shy, so I I'm big on not expecting myself out of others, and definitely not projecting my passions onto my kids. I want them to live their life, and I want to be part of that life with them. So trying to do things in domains that I think they would enjoy and be involved in their life. I'm going to take on a Spartan race at the end of October, so excited for that. But man, what am I learning? I read 5 books at a time, something new all the time. So
Yeah, I'm
uh,
currently
it,
reading all 7 of those.
you see one of my 4 bookshelves behind me
Yeah.
right now. Yeah, so it's the book list is just grows faster than I can read the books, which is a good problem to have. I'm not mad at it at all. But the skill of uncertainty, that's a big one that I keep coming back to in my life. So most often when I've run into problems in my life, it's when I've been certain of certain things and like basically checked that box and then shelved it. So remembering that I really don't know shit, and I'm not certain about too many things in my life, other than most things in life are uncertain, and so approaching things with an open mind, applying cognitive flexibility, and just staying curious. I think curiosity is an amazing skill for resilience. So you stay curious about other people, about the world, about yourself. You're always going to be a learner, and then the opportunities are endless. So the curiosity and I'm applying that a lot to fatherhood right now too, like being curious about why they're behaving a certain way and trying to connect with them rather than control them. Curiosity is something I'm really trying to have as my thought interpretation, if you will.
Yeah, I think I something I've been learning about curiosity, just as it applies especially to parenthood, is there's not a big difference between curiosity and compassion, I find. Like, you know, in the struggles with self as well, when you bring to, okay, why am I doing this behavior I don't want to do, or not doing this behavior I do want to do? When you bring that with curiosity, there's this gentleness, there's this warmth, and there's this openness to change and the sense of freedom, as opposed to when you come in with force. And it's the same thing with with my son. He feels much more heard, and there's the sense of mutual warmth when I'm curious. And it might actually be not from a place of feeling warm or compassionate in that moment, but actually just curious, wanting to know. Yeah, it's
Beautiful.
a really powerful state of mind, curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity kills conclusions. So like if like your buddy that felt like shame because of his thoughts, like if you're curious, you're not going to feel shame. And I hate the term shame. I hate when people deal with it, because like now you're applying these labels to your identity. Like definitely feel guilt about your actions and try to change actions. I'm all for guilt when you do something that you don't want to do anymore that can motivate you to change. But stay curious with yourself. That identity, make sure it's broad, make sure it's continuously evolving to align with your perceived values, your core values. And yeah, stay curious, stay adaptable, and that's going to allow you to show up in life in the relative domains that are important to you as they inevitably change over time, and you would inevitably experience stress over time. So train that skill of resilience.
How can people find you and learn more about your work with resilience?
Yeah, so my Substack is called Resilient Mental State. You can find everything that I do through there. So I do a podcast through that as well, but I post all that on there. So the podcast is on Apple, uh, Spotify, and YouTube, but also called Resilient Mental State. You go to Substack, it's all through there.
Thank you so much for coming on, Kyle. It's been really a pleasure talking to you.
You too, brother. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Mindform podcast. I'm Ryan A. Bush, founder and author of Designing the Mind and creator of Mindform. Mindform is an exclusive community and training platform for sculpting your psychological software. Members get access to a group of like-minded psychotechs, including all of our guests on this podcast, gamified growth tools, events and retreats, and a collection of transformative programs for mental health and self-mastery. You can learn more and apply to join at mindform.io/podcast. I hope to see you inside.